Jason Tondro here with my awesome and amazing co-host, Christopher McGlothlin.
Hey, thank you.
Creative pit boss of Ghost Show Press. Is that right? Or is it Ghost Show Press?
That is correct. It's Ghost Show Press, yes.
Show Press. And you started that, I remember last year we got our buttons.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. We had our first Kickstarter last March, and we made about $1,600 more than I ever would have expected. And thank you. And now I'm busy working on planning and hiring people for my next big thing. As soon as I finish what will probably be my last ever freelancer gig.
Was that the UN Super Team, that Kickstarter?
Yes, indeed. The
summit. You said your last ever freelancing gig.
It's looking that way. Yes, I may take one more job depending on whether the publisher and I can agree on my rights being respected as a freelancer. But right now my mind is I'm doing Ghost Show stuff as soon as I write this one last freelance chapter. Yeah, wow, it's my last night as a freelancer. Oh, wow.
That's a big deal for you, because you...
I know. I mean, nobody believes in me less than me. I can't believe I'm doing this.
And I'm also joined by Dan Hauser. Welcome, Dan.
Howdy. Hello.
And Dan, of course, is the illustrator on the book we're going to spend most of tonight talking about, which is Rogues for Icons. But you're really the line artist for Icons.
Yeah. Save for the Brazilian edition, where I have to say this, they did fantastic work taking my pictures as inspiration and just redoing them. It was like,
I had no idea. Okay, I'm going to ask you about it. I want to know more about the Brazilian edition. All right.
But yes, I am line artist for Icons.
How long have you been the artist for Icons?
Steve, that would be what, 2014?
Gosh, as long as there's been an Icons, basically.
Yeah, since first edition.
2014, isn't it?
Yeah,
14 maybe earlier.
Might have been as early as 2012, I think.
You know what? It was 2011. As I look at the binder I have over here for my first edition, I printed out.
There you go,
for play tests.
And as my third guest here is Steve Kenson, the other creator and the writer of Rogues and of everything, not of the Icons line. Is that right?
Well, large parts of it. These days, pretty much, it's me and Dan who are doing the primary writing as far as Icons is concerned.
And please carry on.
Oh, I throw in modules every now and again when I get an idea for something that I think would be fun as a GM to run for people.
Yeah.
So I create modules. I go, hey, this is a fun thing for a GM to do.
And how many do we have? What kind of adventure support do we already have for Icons?
Oh gosh, I've actually stopped counting adventures. But there's quite a few.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And so we're going to spend kind of now I forgot the rest of my introduction. Steve, you're at Green Ronin, of course. What's your title there?
I am technically staff designer at Green Ronin, which just means that I write stuff.
You write stuff. And are you affiliated with other companies as well? Because I know you have a lot of other things that you're working on.
I still do, in addition to Green Ronin and Ad Infinitum Adventures, which does Icons, I still do freelance some, as time allows. And these days, I'm doing some work for Onyx Path, which just launched their new Kickstarter for the new edition of Aberrant, and I was lead designer on that project. So,
and that's a huge project that a lot of people have been looking forward to.
Yeah, it has been.
And if anyone's listening, I would love to illustrate something for it.
Nice, very good. We know a guy. Now, remind me a little bit how Aberrant fits into the Trinity whole kind of set of games.
Well, the Trinity Continuum set of games basically focuses on three main eras.
Yeah.
And they basically worked backwards from the future as far as that goes, the same as the original editions of the game. So Aeon, the first game, is set about 100 years in the future and is a sort of space opera adventure with focusing on characters with various psionic powers. And one of the prime antagonists in Aeon are the Aberrants, who are these mutated post-humans with these sort of chaotic quantum powers.
Gotcha.
And the Aberrant setting, which is set in the near future, it's set 10 years from the present, is about the early years of this setting where the Novas, people with these quantum manipulating abilities, first emerge, essentially bringing the whole notion of superheroes, people with superpowers, to life, and is all about their efforts to improve or change the world in different ways.
And you've updated the setting from the 90s.
We have. The original edition of Aberrant was a very 90s game in a lot of ways, both in terms of its tone and its style, and because the original edition was published 20 years ago, but was set 10 years in then the future. The original edition of Aberrant was set in the far future era of 2008.
It's like one of those great 50s sci-fi movies where they talk about, the year 1980 will be remembered as the year we first landed on the moon.
Yeah, that's great.
Right.
I thought my favorite part about that. I was going to say my favorite part about that whole thing. I've got my first edition over here in my garage. It's my blue hardcover edition.
Yeah.
I loved that game, and we were dedicated to it. But we always like, is anyone really going to play the XWF stuff, like the wrestling stuff? I was like, because it was really cool. It's a cool idea that wrestling evolves into this combat sport. It's not quite MMA, but it's like they actually use their powers against each other, but they still talk like it's all fake.
Yeah.
I was like, oh man, I was like, I wonder if that's going to be in the new book or not, because we're seeing the resurgence of wrestling again now, which I was like, that's really funny. It's like,
I'll tell you that it's not my cup of tea, but there are definitely guys on the Aberrant team who are huge fans. So I believe it's actually
thought it was a jarring change of gears as I was reading. I'm like, oh man, this stuff is so great. I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah, no, I think it's actually one of the first stretch goals that got unlocked in the Kickstarter is some kind of a wrestling supplement.
That's you got to watch those people that mix their gaming and their pro wrestling.
I'm wearing a I'm a Jim Cornette guy T-shirt, so just so you're aware, I'm a huge wrestling fan. But that part of it was like, guys, really, wrestling? Let's.
And so before we get to Rogues, anybody else have something that we need to bring up in kind of our housekeeping section? Dan, you mentioned a YouTube channel. I should point people.
Yeah, two things I do on my YouTube channel, Retro Station 1989. The name refers to the year I got a Nintendo Entertainment System, and I play retro games there a lot. I do streaming of new games occasionally, but moreover, I do art. So if I'm drawing something for Icons, I'll announce and go, hey, I'm doing a piece for Icons, come check it out, or a t-shirt, or just stuff that I'm working on so people can get technique advice live while I'm there. And then the streams stay up.
People see your process on YouTube?
Yeah. Yep. Start to finish from, I started with analog sketches nowadays because I like just having the chance to do pencils again for a while. And having something, finally at this last convention, I got a guy who was just buying stuff for Icons. He was like, oh my goodness, you have pencils for this? So a fellow bought the original pencils for the Villanomicon cover, the first edition Villanomicon cover. I'm like, I have no idea what to price this because I never thought this was going to leave my portfolio. I didn't think anybody would really want that. He's like, oh no, I want all of that. And so now I'm like, well, okay, I think I'll start creating some hard copies of some of the things, like the Rogues cover is in pieces because that's how I work, kind of like a animation cell. So it's all different chunks. Yeah, very, very much so. And so, but yeah, on my channel, you can see me draw it. And if you subscribe to the channel and click the little bell, you'll hear when you'll be notified that, hey, Dan's online live now. Come check it out while I'm drawing. And I have a regular schedule of just about every day I do some kind of streaming.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. And I should note, by the way, that the awesome cover for Rogues is like 100% Dan's idea, because I was like, let's do something like a police lineup or something like that. And Dan's like, or we could do something cool and draw the villains in like a bar. and have like a bar fight breakout. So, in the inside, cover of the book opposite the table of contents is that same scene, except the villains are all fighting. So,
well, I want to talk about that. So maybe we should just move right into that.
Sure.
So what is the creative process like on this book? Dan, we'll start with you.
Sure.
Okay. Well, as for the cover, it's funny. When Icons first started, there were two ideas that were thrown around for. Well, there was just one main idea that was thrown around for advertising. Which I will say this: Mike Lafferty, who's not with us this evening, but I wanted to say I just love the fact that Fainting Goat loved the Hostess Fruit Pies ad that we did for first edition Icons so much that he has adopted that as a part of the Fainting Goat thing. I'm like, I love that. I could read those. He should make them. They should have a supplement that's just all of those.
Yeah.
Because he and JT do just a fantastic job at that.
They are super fun.
Or JG. It's like I could read all of them. They're so good. So I was suggested because when we were doing the Villanomicon. It's so funny. I drew a little thing. I made up a little thing, and it was just the villain sitting in a lineup, like they're being busted for some reason in their costume still. And I don't know why all these different guys would be in a lineup. Again, I didn't know anything about police procedure, I guess. I'm like, so here you go. I'm like, oh, and then it says the unusual suspects. Steve's note was, Dan, there's a fine line between homage and fromage. And then when he suggested that cover being a lineup, I was like, Steve, a very wise man gave me some advice on that very cover idea.
Yeah.
I was like, so let's try something else.
Hoist on my own petard.
Well, you give good advice. What can I say? So the cover was that first. I was like, you know what? You already shot down that idea before, and it doesn't seem like it would be. I mean, I could do that. That's an easy cover. That's an easy, real quick one to get done. But I really like. There's an old kids book called The Monster at the End of This Book, starring Grover from Sesame Street.
Right.
And each page that you turn, you're like basically demolishing the thing he sets up. For you, like it's sequential art in the purest form. And I was like, just having a 2-page gag would be really funny for a book that's not really supposed to be as like, with the first Villanomicon and Adversaries, you really get the sense that you're really looking at something that was good guys and bad guys. With this book, I got the sense that it was like, these are the guys in the middle who can go either way. Like you could have them be bad guys or just really like the outsiders at the beginning, or how Batman Brave and the Bold played the outsiders. Right. So I said, well, so let's imagine they're in a bar, they're all together, but they're not like the Legion of Doom planning anything. They're just all happening to be in the same place. And then the reader is a guy who just steps into the room, or a girl who steps in the room and sees this motley crew, and they're all looking at you on the cover. And then when you flip the page, everyone goes, oh, who told where their secret bases? And they're all fighting each other because that's how villains do. Right. When they get mad, they're paranoid. They are a cowardly and superstitious lot. So he's even added people to the fight, the fracas. So I was like, that's funny because there's people there you didn't even notice.
So Steve, Dan brought up this idea that Rogues was kind of the sort of shady characters in the middle. But as I was looking through the book, that didn't strike me that way because we've got like some pretty cosmic menaces in this book.
Yep, that's true. Rogues is kind of a grab bag.
Yeah, and I was wondering, like, if you're trying to characterize Rogues, is it different in any sort of thematic or conceptual way from the villain books we already have? What are your goals for this book?
Well, I think that, on the one hand, Rogues, was more, in the sense of, more villains, and that sort of thing in a, don't, break it, don't fix it if it ain't broke kind of way. But Rogues was also a chance to expand in a few different directions and do a few things that we hadn't done in one form or another in previous Icons products.
Such as?
Such as some of the more cosmic level menaces,
right?
Croton the Conqueror and the Devouring Dark and the like are way more high-powered, cosmic threats.
Was Adversaries out by the time A to Z came out?
Adversaries was around that time. I think A to Z was actually being produced sequentially around that same time.
So you kind of needed the cosmic rules from A to Z before you could really do the Rogues characters.
Yeah, in some regards, you know. And so Rogues builds on some of that.
Yeah.
You know, it touches upon, you know, some concepts that, you know, we didn't necessarily do in Adversaries. I wanted to do a few more sort of run-of-the-mill, you know, sort of Flash's Rogues Gallery type villains, you know, who are just, you know,
I guess
guys who are trying to make a dishonest living.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I guess my point was more of it adds to the spectrum of villainy.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Yeah. Because I like the team that here's a funny creative process thing. It's like, hey, Steve, here are a bunch of names. I had an idea literally for a team based only on ska band song names. I absolutely did. And as I'm drawing one, it was like an idea of the Fallen Angels series from New Mutants. I was like, so they're basically villains, but not really, but they could go either way. Like they could be just these dire, like, oh look, they are basically the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Or you can send a leader type player character to go and try and reform them. Or you can even have the players play as them, you know, trying to struggle through the thought of being something out of Chronicle or like, you know, that angsty, you know, teenage kind of comic. So
we kind of approach.
Steve is amazing at this stuff.
We kind of approached that. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jason.
No, Steve. I was
just going to say Dan and I kind of both approached the creative process from two ends. In that, you know, I basically have a notes file on my mobile devices that you know I just jot down random, you know, super villain names, you know, and character ideas and whatnot. You know, I'll think of something and I'll be like, oh yeah, you know, and I'll jot down a name and maybe a note of text or something like that. And I just keep a huge running list of things. And Dan has, you know, sketchbooks, and, you know, and will, you know, occasionally send me stuff and be like, hey, I drew this guy.
Yeah.
You know.
Case in point, Obliteroid.
You know, right. Obliteroid is like, you know, I drew this, you know, weird, you know, blobby guy inside of a, you know, a giant tank robot, you know, because he looks like Krang from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Right.
You know, and, you know, so oftentimes, you know, I'll come up with a character concept and I'll say, hey, Dan, you know, can you give me a, you know, like a visual concept for this kind of thing? Or Dan will send me a visual concept and I'll be like, hey, great. Do you have any ideas for this? And he'll tell me either he does, or he'll say, yeah, just make something up. He's a guy. I don't know who he is. I just drew him. You know,
he's a guy I want to see punching another guy. So.
You know, right. And so we'll kind of go back and forth with that a lot of the times.
It's my dream, by the way. My dream.
Yeah, you know, well,
being 100% honest, working with Steve is amazing, and it's like alchemy. It's like,
yeah, absolutely.
Every time we throw something out, it either does work or it explodes, and we just go, I'm moving on.
Yeah, definitely.
And
maybe we'll do the moving on book. That would be really funny. I think I've got a couple of things that we're just like, no.
all of y'all have done a lot of supervillain creation. Christopher, you did a whole book full of supervillains for Eminem, I think.
I did. I think I did more of Rogues Gallery than anybody else. There were some other fabulous people in there, like Alex Thomas and Ade Smith and other people I'm forgetting, and I hate myself for forgetting.
and I was wondering, some of the characters in Rogues are what we would call, what the word you used was the homage.
Yes.
Right? Where they're a fairly obvious take on a famous character that's been changed some, maybe to fit into the icon's sort of tone better, or to scrub some of the specific serial numbers off, or maybe to scratch a particular creative itch that you had or something you wanted to do with that character.
Sure.
But plenty of them are also original creations. And I was wondering, because my stance on this has personally evolved. I for a long time, I was kind of just very skeptical of homage characters in general. I just kind of was not a fan because maybe in many ways I thought that they were too easy, and from a creative sense, they felt like kind of a ripoff. But I have since come to realize that the homage character is the role-playing game version of a cover band. That you're taking a song that everybody knows, and you're making it your own and doing your own version. And we all do it. Like all of us that are in the game design business and amateurs, professionals, wherever you are, written up our version of Batman, you know, and we've spent days on it to make it as perfect as we could, you know. And this is how we learn how to do what we do. And we still continue to do it even when we're professionals and are making up our own creations for publication. Sometimes you just love playing the hits, man.
Well, here's my thought on this.
Good. Yeah.
Okay? Wiser, greater, and more talented men than I have always said that superheroes are America's modern mythology. And that's the thing about mythology. You can twist the tale slightly. You know, you can have Zeus make love to a slightly different woman in this version of the story.
Yeah. But
you can't really go off making up a completely new set of gods without either being burned at the stake as a heretic or basically being a cult leader. You know, I mean, if you go too far off the reservation, you quickly find that not many people are following you. So, you know, to me, it's like if you want to play with superheroes, it's because you inherently want to put your own spin on the existing archetypes and the existing tropes. You know, if you didn't want to do that, you would come up with what might be the next great original and fabulously great or fabulously terrible idea.
Sure. Well, I mean, and the push and pull between, you know, homage or inspired characters and, you know, completely original characters is a time-honored tradition in the comics themselves. I mean, comics creators, as long as there have been comics, have been doing the exact same thing. I mean, how many versions of Superman appeared in 1940 in the comics?
Oh,
you know, I mean,
or just Doc Savage.
I think that, you know, all comics fans can agree that, you know, the resemblance of Jim Starlin's Thanos to Darkseid is probably not coincidental.
No, I mean, he's
Starlin even admits it.
You know, I mean,
and by the 2000s, I mean, it had become a kind of shorthand where
sure,
Warren Ellis could talk about a character that was obviously Superman but didn't look like Superman. But he didn't have to spend any time introducing that character because we all knew that archetype.
You know.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Really. I think the qualitative judgment you have to put on it is how much original gets mixed in with the familiar.
Yeah.
Right, and I think also that the masters of this kind of thing, and I don't consider myself anywhere near this, but it isn't just Romana Clef. It's actually like a manipulation of the context of the character, which is why Apollo and Midnighter work so damn well. Like their universe is the dark reflection of a DC universe where a man from the stars came down and was the perfect embodiment of 1940s goodness. And one guy was an embodiment of the result of 1930s, you know, decadence and crime, and he's avenging all of that. And so they were these, but then now Warren Ellis goes, nope, these were two guys from the 1980s, like Iran-Contra era secret mission forces, and they were designed to appeal to people to be that. And it was very, you know, it was as always his comment on how comics are.
Yeah.
And very well done. But everyone thinks he's just taking swings at people or swings at the industry. It's like, no, he's telling a story that is not the story you're reading. Like, if you're reading that story, it's like, yeah, it's an entertaining story. But when he basically gives you the history of comics in the first, like, Change or Die in Stormwatch was basically him first going, okay, forget the Iron Age of comics. We're done with that. I'm keeping like 2 or 3 of the original characters from this team. The rest of them are fired. And I'm going to create a story about comics, beginning with Superman and Jenny Sparks and all these pulp characters. Then I'm going to go all the way through to the modern era. And then when they are threatening to end the comic, I'm going to kill them off screen in another comic by the aliens from Aliens.
Yeah,
which I think if that isn't a perfect story of the comic book industry, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I have to make an obligatory plug here for a guy I know who Dr. Jeff Clock, his book How to Read Superhero Comics and Why, has a whole chapter about Warren Ellis's Alien Stormwatch crossover.
Oh,
in which Jeff realizes that the reason why Ellis kills everybody off in the Aliens crossover is because contractually no one is allowed to ever reference the Aliens crossover ever again. So he kills everyone off so that you cannot retcon it, right? Because no one could ever go anywhere near it. So
that's the story of comics, and that's the beauty
perfect locked room mystery.
Exactly. Well, Flint lives, but whatever happened to that very famous Fuji? The watchtower blew up, and the people were on the watchtower. I think we're not really allowed to talk about it.
That's basically it. All right. So, Steve, you've got a long history of putting out characters which were kind of which were willing to address kind of social issues in the world, and characters like Johnny Rocket, and I remember, Christopher, you telling stories about how you're manning the Green Ronin booth, and you would get the Johnny Rocket fan club.
Oh yes. Well, this is a wonderful offset of Steve getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and me sort of easing into my role in the game industry as like the substitute Steve Kenson. Or after seeing In-Game, as I like to describe it, I'm the Ant-Man of the gaming industry.
Your humility does you credit.
Indeed.
Oh my God!
Oh God, man!
Oh God! The scene where the Hulk is trying to convince the kids to let Ant-Man into the selfie. Steve and I have actually done that at the Ronin booth. Right down to me saying he's actively saying no. Okay, so there you go. Yeah, and it was just so yeah, I got to take a lot of praise and compliments on behalf of Steve, and I always tried to make sure to tell him, 87 people came by to tell you you're great and they love your game. And there was always this determined group of people who just could not wait to tell Steve about how much the inclusion of Johnny Rocket in that game meant to them. Yeah. And I got to know them, and that was wonderful. But my heart always broke a little, like, oh my God, Steve should be here for this. He really should be here, and it was sad. It's like right about the time like cell phones got to be a thing where I could have just, so like Steve, come to the booth. I can't stop. They stopped coming. So I just feel terrible. I guess they get fed up of talking to me all the time. Not that I can blame them, but yeah. But God, I just felt so bad that Steve had to miss all that.
Well, so I read in one of your notes, Steve, when you were annotating Freedom City, that you were sort of inspired by North Star when you
Yep.
But Johnny Rocket's so much better than North Star. I'm sorry.
Well, like all comic book characters, it depends on who's writing them.
I absolutely, you're absolutely right. Of course, I was introduced to North Star back in the original John Byrne Alpha Flight days. Yes, and admittedly, North Star was not a particularly well fleshed out character at that point. Yeah. But this kind of returns. I saw a lot of this, and maybe it's because I was just looking for it, and maybe I'm just oversensitive to it. But I saw a lot of this in Rogues. Characters who were kind of addressing contemporary social issues, and not just sexuality, but all kinds of things like politics. And there's Nazis and Klan members and all kinds of people in this book. And I wondered if you wanted to say anything about that.
Well, I think it's just a matter of again. I think it's something that comics have always done. That they've always addressed contemporary social issues. They've always, there's certainly a time-honored history of Nazis as villains in the comics.
Yeah.
I'm only disappointed that it's considered a contemporary issue.
Yes.
And it's not limited to Golden Age flashbacks.
But I mean, contemporarily speaking, sort of back in the 50s and 60s, the Superman radio show went out of its way to fight the Klan in the South.
Yeah, absolutely.
So absolutely. I have only a burning desire to see Nazis and Klans members getting punched in the face.
Yeah.
So when I created White Lightning, I wanted him to also to be basically a fake. He's just putting on that hood and that costume to scare people. Mostly it's just a show. And so when he gets punched, I feel good. I want the GM to have my characters like put him in a headlock, give him a noogie, like show him for the cowardly piece of garbage that he is. And then everyone feels better about it. So we're not all immediately seeing and going, ooh, we're seeing and going, yeah, I can't wait to knock the crap out of that.
Yeah, there's
in a metaphorical sense, but also I grew up in all ages clubs in high school, post high school. So trust me, I've had my share of like run-ins with people like that. So it tends to be, they're all for real about violence so long as there's 5 and there's one scared kid who doesn't fit in, or there's one scared black kid, or there's one scared Jewish kid, or there's one scared gay kid. Right. If there's 5 on 1, and if you go on Twitter, I bet you'll find this. I'm not saying that it is happening, folks, but it might be. And you'll find that the jump on is what it's all about. So the second you fight back, saying anyone fights back in the smallest meaningful way, throwing a milkshake on a guy, making him look ridiculous, everyone's like, oh, this is violence. I'm like, great. Are you scared now? Because all the good people have had enough. And when the good people have had enough, and it's come to that point, which thank God for that, or whoever you'd like to thank whoever you'd like, but thank the will of the human populace for going, you know what? I think we've had enough of this little test drive. I think we're over with this. Let's just be done. I want to have tanks in my 4th of July. Yeah. We're not really watching it anymore. We're not scared. We're not worried. We just cannot wait to pull the plug on all of this. Like, yep.
There's a lot of C.S. Lewis, I think, where he says the devil cannot suffer to be mocked. And
yes.
And that reminds me of kind of what you're talking about, Dan.
Paging Mr. White, which is one of the greatest pieces of RPG fiction in my history of drawing and reading.
Whose superpower is literally massive amounts of white privilege. Yeah.
Yeah, he literally is white privilege. I'm like, I wonder if that's too subtle for some people.
So let's talk about Mr. White, because he's a great example of what I was talking about. So Mr. White is this guy who gets away with whatever he wants to, and people just say, well, that's just Mr. White being Mr. White.
Yep.
And the parallels with the current president seem pretty obvious to me. Is that what do we say to people that say, keep your politics out of my gaming?
Well, don't buy my games.
Okay,
that's fine. I mean, the notion of that politics shouldn't be included in games usually is code for politics that I don't agree with shouldn't be included in games, or politics that distract me shouldn't be included in games because I am in such a position where I can comfortably ignore politics due to my personal level of privilege.
Right.
100%. And that's why, by the way, I don't mean to interrupt Steve, but Origins, the cover, I went out of my way. But Steve was like, we need to be more inclusive. I was like, absolutely. Let's go. 100% of characters are inclusive. Not only that, the image itself, I color toned it. So the background buildings are the exact spectrum of the pride flag. There are more inclusive characters on that cover than I think I've ever seen in any role-playing game cover that doesn't feature just all the characters from the series. But I mean, I was like, I want, if you're, and this isn't to call out specifically a specific game, but if you're truly the champions, why are you not the champions of my youngest sibling, my sister, my friends from high school? Like, if you're the champions, why is the guy in the cover dressed like Quick Kick, but as an American guy with a dry cut, but he's not Asian? It's like, I would be happy.
That was the 80s for you.
Yeah, there you go. And you know what? And that is representative of the time. And again, I don't know how it is now because I haven't played another super role playing game for so very long. But I'm looking forward to Aberrant though. So because that one was a very inclusive book. I mean, you had every type of range of human was capable of having their MR node explode, and then they could be representative of whoever. I just I think that this intersectionality and the inclusion of everyone in playing our game, especially icons, that book did it, and this book absolutely give them bad guys that those guys can fight.
So, Christopher, I don't know how much you can talk. You and I have sat over the table at Gen Con, and you've talked about some of your Ghost Show stuff that you have coming up, and I don't know how much you can talk about it, but maybe I should just kind of redirect to the general. What's your stance on keeping politics out of people's gaming?
I think politics is like any other thing that you do in your storytelling.
Yeah.
If you're going to do it well.
Right.
Because if you create a character and the sole being into that character is, I'll just pick something this character's gay. I think, well, that's a good start, but is there anything else there? I mean, do they have friends? Do they have family? I mean, did they grow? Did being gay affect their life in any way?
Yeah.
It's just. I'll give you an example. Okay, I got the Arrow video release of the classic Robert Wise film, The Andromeda Strain, which to me is one of those great hard science fiction films. And I was pleased to see that they actually got somebody to do an audio commentary for it. I'm like, this film's 2 hours long. My God, what is this guy going to talk about? And he sits there for 2 hours. He talks about his recent visit to the emergency room. He tries to talk about the history of disease and science fiction, and somehow doesn't mention stuff like George Romero's The Crazies, and misses like 5 other films that I thought of, and I'm not getting paid to do a commentary for it.
Right.
And it's like whenever whenever he's thank you. And whenever he's got nothing else to talk about, he'll just look at some random bad decision a character makes and goes, he should be working for Trump.
Right.
And I will be the last person to defend the current administration. But when is your distaste for Trump an excuse for not doing your fucking job?
Right.
And to me,
maybe he should be working for Trump.
Maybe so. And and any time that I'm subjected to a movie or an article or a meme or something, and it's got nothing, and it doesn't have anything deeper to say than "fuck Trump."
Yeah,
I'm like, well, you've completely you've won so many followers to your cause with that.
Right.
I mean, there's so much political art that I love, and a good chunk of it is written by people who we would probably have never voted the same way in an election.
Yeah, right.
Like one of my all-time top 5 filmmakers, Peter Watkins, is a guy who's currently living in Sweden because he's convinced like every other government in the world is so right-wing they're actively trying to kill him. Okay. He's this wonderfully far left madman who's made 5 of the greatest films I've ever seen in my life. Yeah. And they're all incredibly political. Yeah. And even when I don't agree with them, they're so well made and so thought provoking. I can sit there and go, I don't agree with that, but by God, if anything could change my mind, that would be it.
Right. Right.
And I'm just distressed at the number of people who do lazy, crappy pieces of work. And when it fails or people call them on it, their excuse is, well, obviously it's the people on the other side of the political perspective who can't handle my politics. No, they can't handle the fact that you rip them off and you suck.
Or you can't take a joke. That's always the fallback position of anyone who's just being insulting. I will say this, Steve doesn't do that. He doesn't take cheap shots. He doesn't take the easy road. And Mr. White is a gut punch. It's just like, hey, do you feel that a little bit? Maybe just fight that guy.
And the funny thing
fight
is,
the notion of that kind of thing.
You know, I mean, well, and the funny thing about Mr. White is, although he absolutely bears remarkable resemblance to Trump and a lot of other people who benefit tremendously from the wealthy white straight male privilege.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, he is very loosely based on a character from a superhero campaign that I ran back in the late 80s.
Yeah.
Who indirectly was also inspired by Donald Trump.
Right.
In that he was a supervillain homage to John Byrne's Lex Luthor.
Okay.
Who, of course, was inspired by Donald Trump.
Right. Right.
When
I remember the Lex Luthor biography.
Yeah, that looks exactly like Art of the Game.
Yeah.
I mean, and when Byrne was looking to remake Luthor as this sort of sleazy corporate raider type, I mean, Donald Trump in the '80s New York was the archetype he was working with, and so I've run this version of this character in other games, and he's intended to present, one of the things I like to present in superhero games is challenges that characters can't punch, is to occasionally set them up with situations. And there's nothing wrong with a great, knockdown, drag out super fight, but occasionally It's good to set the characters up with a threat that, this guy doesn't even have any powers, but, all he's got is a lot of lawyers and the media on his side. And what are you going to do?
Well, when you're in a game like Icons where you have traits and things,
mm-hmm.
you don't need to have a mechanical number. You can play on people's other labels, and so you can still be mechanical without having
mm-hmm.
dice at
it. Yes.
And as an art note, the drawing of Mr. White was more to, in my opinion. And I drew him one of two. I drew him two ways, and the one I presented to Steve was one who wasn't smoking a pipe, but he was Bob Dobbs, like the white guy.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, that is such a good boilerplate white dude that if I just illustrate him slightly off of that, and then I looked at him like, man, the stupid hair, like the hair, that blonde comb to the side thing. It's like, well, if I make him blonde, but just blonde dude, blonde dad, So he's basically a mixture of like Hugh Beaumont, but a blonde guy, and J.R. Bob Dobbs, and all the 50s dads that I ever saw on TV, like that real, like, they come home wearing a business, and you're like, what's his job again? I don't know. Mr. Brady came home in like a sweater vest, and he was an architect, I think.
That's all we know.
Christopher, you were talking about, reminded me of when Dwayne McDuffie, he did a lot of interviews before he passed, and he was talking about his time writing Justice League, and he would talk about how, like, as soon as there were like two black characters on the team, it immediately got labeled a black book, right, by fans, and people would say, well, color shouldn't matter, like race shouldn't matter. And he said, but that's not the lived experience. Like, if I'm gonna be black, or I'm gonna write a gay character, or I'm gonna write whatever this character is, a female character, like that the fact that she is a female superhero is going to be incredibly important to just how she lives her life. And she can't just be a blank superhero with a gender or race or whatever, or faith or whatever attached, because all those things become really important to who they are. And I think this seems to be like what you were getting at, right? Like,
I mean, the very well-meaning effort to say that someone's different qualities that marginalize them shouldn't matter is it's an attempt to try and be inclusive. But unfortunately, what it also says is it says that the lived qualities of that marginalization and that experience don't matter. And that we don't want to hear about that.
And on the editorial side, did you ever read the New Guardians?
Oh yeah, I remember the New Guardians very well.
I think that comic would have really benefited from having, number one, somebody who knew what drugs were, and number two, somebody who knew who gay people were, like who had ever met
a single gay person.
Exactly. I'm like, oh man, it's a rough read because of that. And it's like I said, I have queer family members, and it's like, when you read comics like that, this is nothing like anybody I've ever met. This is a cartoon of a cartoon.
Well, let's face it, there are many, many works of art that could benefit from being written by somebody that have some feel or knowledge of the type of people they're writing about.
Exactly. And Chris, Mouse is my go-to for that. It's like, you want to read how it should be done. If you want to either do your research and try and listen to authentic voices and get as close as you can, or just go, hey, come here. Would you like to write part of this? Who do we know that can write this? And then maybe, say we would like to have it. Let's write it that way, But
and I gotta say,
with women in comics, female characters in comics, it's like they read so well when written by women.
As a quick side note, I just want to say kudos to Steve Orlando for actually doing kind of redeeming the character of Extrano from New Guardians He's
right.
He's actually a bit character in Orlando's Apollo and Midnighter miniseries, and plays sort of their mystic advisor.
Yes.
And lives like in this lovely villa in Central America with his boyfriend, and is sort of a bit Sorcerer Supreme-ish.
Yeah.
And of course is just fabulously done in that particular story. So
that's awesome.
As I said, it's there are no bad characters, there are only bad writers.
And even then, it's like I read it and I'm like, I get that the person has probably heard. It'd be like if you asked for somebody to create a Chinese character, but they'd only ever seen somebody had only ever seen Breakfast at Tiffany's,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how that read to me.
Sure.
And this is as just a straight ally. I'm like, oh, this is just, come on, people.
Yeah.
Come on, read a book.
And it is, things change.
But in the 80s, as you said before,
again,
Steve, that was the 80s.
Yeah.
Late 80s.
I just saw this real briefly, but I just saw this Barbara Walters interview with Harvey Fierstein from the 80s, and it is stunning.
What you mean?
Well, just in the sense of how queer people are talked to and talked about in that interview, that is just it's stark to look at the differences, and where it's not outright, but it borders on so are queer people really good people? Like asking that question, like are you're basically here to defend your right to exist?
Wow. And we
what's worshiping Satan really like?
We know some people even today that still feel like they have to defend their right to exist.
Oh yeah, more so than ever in some cases.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, more so than ever in some cases. Well, so we spent a lot of time on this book, and is there something that we have missed or that we would like to talk about, Christopher? Anything you want to that I missed or skipped over?
Ask them first.
Okay.
I'll get back to you.
Open to the crowd. Is Rogues? Are we going to find it in game stores, or do we print on demand, or how do we get it?
Well, you drive through RPG.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll have the PDF, which you can print on demand from there.
Okay.
And I think that's a good centralized place to find it. And I don't know anywhere else, Steve.
Are we a physical print run for it?
No.
Okay.
Icons is a two-man show at this point, so although it does well for our little indie project, it's one of those things that traditional print and distribution just isn't worthwhile for us.
I absolutely get that. I totally
And if you ever see me at a convention, I always have print copies of everything, every main book. So they'll be signed and inscribed for you.
Or all three of you be at Gen Con next month?
Yes, looking forward to it.
Yes.
I would love to be. I don't know. It's a matter of seeing if my cousin can keep me into a place. He lives just outside of the city, so that might be good. But I wouldn't have a room, and I didn't buy a badge yet, so I don't know. Maybe I don't think so though. Not this year.
Professor McGlothlin.
Well, I had to look up a title because I had a final thought about this whole thing about politics and the creative process. We were at Alamo Draft House, of course, for Spider-Man Far From Home, which everybody should go see now. What's that?
Looking forward to it.
Oh, fabulous movie! And the trailers before that, they advertised the trailer for a new film that's coming out called Blinded by the Light, and it's about a young man, teenager, not quite a man, living in England around 1987, and he gets turned on to the music of Bruce Springsteen.
Springsteen movie. It looks phenomenal. And
everybody in his family and his social circus is down on him because he's listening to music being made by a white man.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about his right to find something universal and human in art made by somebody different than he.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we as creators, even though most of us will never be Springsteen, in fact, some of us will never be the guy in the parking lot selling T-shirts for Springsteen, or the guy that Springsteen's going, come on, get in the picture, McGee. He's actively saying no, Bruce. You know, I think that as creators, that should be our aspiration, is to find something that's very, 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 very human. Because I'm one of those ancient people that still believes that far more unites the human race than divides it, and I think that's what we should be getting at.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know, if you try and you fall short of that, that's great.
At least you tried.
And there are many, and the paths to get there. I mean, it should be coming from, you know, white, black, gay, straight, trans, on infinitum voices. But I'm just saying that that's the thing we should all be shooting for, is to tell stories about the things that affect all of us, while we can talk about how our own individual experiences get us there.
Because the world will be a better place if everybody role played.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what's funny is I turned 50 this year, and we seem to be closer to that world than ever before.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah,
on that note, maybe we should call it for tonight. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I thought we had a pretty interesting stuff to talk about. We'll put some links in the thread here for all the stuff that we talked about. Go pick up Rogues. It's a fantastic book, and if you're an Icons, even if you're not an Icons player, these are some fantastic supervillains with great plot hooks and stuff in them too. So,
thanks very much, Jason.
Thanks to you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having us.